morning. I'm delighted to be speaking with Mónica Bardají Pujadas, who is an international family lawyer based in Barcelona. Mónica specializes in international family law, assisting international families based in Spain and Spanish expats living overseas. Good afternoon, Mónica.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to invite me to have this interview about our law with expats living in Spain in this case.
It's a pleasure to speak to you. So if you don't mind, Mónica, I'll ask you a few questions. Firstly, we'll begin with divorce. Can expatriate families or expat individuals divorce in your country, in Spain? And if so, how long do they need to have lived in Spain to do so?
Expatriates can divorce in Spain after 3 months of the celebration of their marriage. If both live in Spain, they don't need anything else. But if only one of the spouses live in the country, then this person who is going to file the divorce needs 12 months of living in Spain. How the family court check how long this family is living in Spain? With the residence card that the city hall where the family is living extends to the person who wants to be in the city. Family courts are all over the country in almost all the cities. So the only way that the family courts have to check if this family is really living in their city is with this certificate that in Spanish is called Certificado of Empadronamiento. So it's very important that expatriates that are living in Spain go to the city hall and get this residence card.
Okay, and that will make it much easier to start divorce proceedings.
Yes.
And does that mean that a couple can divorce in Spain if one of them lives in Spain and one of them lives overseas, for example, in England?
Yes, there will be any problem to apply for the divorce if one of the expats is living in Spain, if is living for the last 12 months.
12 months.
If it happens in the other side, I mean, if the one who wants to apply for the divorce is living in the UK and the responder lives in Spain, then there is no need of 6 months or 12 months. There is no longer. I mean, they can be filed in Spain without any long time residence in the country.
Okay, that's really good to hear. So actually, for British expat couples who have links to Spain, they may live part-time of the year in Spain or fully in Spain, those couples may have an option to divorce through the Spanish courts or the English courts. So it's very important to get advice in England and Spain to determine which is the best jurisdiction in terms of financial outcome. So how do the courts in Spain approach the division of assets on divorce?
Family courts in Spain make the division of the assets according to the Spanish family civil law, what is we call common law.
Yeah.
That means that for judges in Spain, they don't care if the assets are out of our borders, but we have to be very careful with this kind of judgments because they are not going to be enforced by a Spanish judge out of the Spanish border. So if you want to enforce a Spanish resolution, you will have to hire a professional family lawyer in the country where the asset is placed. That's very important. Okay, and about this civil common law, most of them, they're 50-50. I mean, of course, there's some exceptions because private assets are not inside of the common property.
What do you mean by private assets? Are those
all
things
these,
acquired before the marriage?
yeah, these all the assets that each spouse own before the marriage are private assets.
Okay.
All the inheritance that the spouse receive are private assets. All the donations or gifts that the spouse receive, well, even when they are married, are private assets. All the instruments, gadgets, commercial stuff that you need for your job or commercial or shop are private assets.
Okay.
What happens if a spouse sells a private asset to buy another private asset? It will continue being a private asset.
Right.
What happens if this we use or this spouse use her private asset to buy a common asset because it's registered by both spouses? This spouse, once the marriage is finished with the divorce, will have to be paid back with the money that he used to buy the common asset.
Okay, so that seems to be quite a different approach from the English courts, because in England, it depends quite a lot on the length of the marriage, but generally speaking, in a long marriage, assets that are in one party brought to the marriage or the other, it's all included in the matrimonial pot to be divided on divorce. So there are some exceptions and some exceptions to the rule, but generally all assets are included, whether one party brought them to a marriage or another. So that's another reason that it's important to get advice from lawyers in different jurisdictions, because that financial outcome can be substantially different. What about spousal maintenance awarded to a wife or a husband on divorce? Is that normal in Spain, and how long does it usually last?
Yes, spousal maintenance is very normal that courts give to this spouse who has been the weaker party after the divorce. I mean, none of the spouses needs to prove a special work for the family or with taking care of the children or losing jobs. It's not necessary. It's only a maintenance because the divorce make a financial problem for this part who with the weaker party, because of course a marriage is always a better financial statement for both spouses. Once the divorce starts a new project, but are two different projects. Always is going to be a weaker party because it's very difficult that both can maintain the same status after the divorce. So the Spanish Civil Code protects the weaker party with the spousal maintenance. Of course, depends how long the marriage for example, for 15-20 years of marriage could be spousal maintenance about 10 years, 12 years. Okay.
Okay, so that's interesting. It is dictated generally by the length of the marriage, is that right?
Yes, yes. Okay. Of course, courts are changing the resolutions since 12 years ago. Spousal maintenance was something that could be a long pension life for this weaker party that had with the divorce. But right now, it's very difficult to get a long pension life. Why? Because most of the time the women were the weaker party after the divorce. And with most of the women right now are working, and they're not needed as were 20 or 15 years ago, at least in Spain.
So a different approach again to spousal maintenance in England and Spain, but it may end up with the similar outcome. Although we take a more needs-based approach, it may end up being similar depending on the circumstances. So going back to the division of assets on divorce, we've talked about pre-acquired assets, that's assets acquired by a party before the marriage, being excluded from division in Spain. Yes. Are there any other rules in Spain that allow for the exclusion of assets? For example, inherited assets?
Yes, inherited assets, donations that are made to one of the spouses, all the instruments or gadgets that you need for your business. If you all the payments back that you could ask for the common economy, we call sociedad de gananciales, because the common properties have like their own company, if you can understand, have their own economy, no? So sometimes spouses make payments to these common assets with their own properties.
Yes.
And
yes.
Then they can ask for this money back after divorce and the extinction of the regime of the common property.
So that is a very different approach. And we also have a different approach to inherited assets. In England, inherited assets can be included in the matrimonial pot for division. There are some exclusions to that, and it depends a lot on the length of the marriage and the needs of the parties, but it's not as clear cut, I think, as in Spain. So very interesting differences, and it highlights the needs for individuals who have an international base in England and Spain to get advice from both jurisdictions. Well, it's been so lovely to talk to you today, Mónica, and that's been very helpful to give a very clear summary. I think you mentioned that the advice you've given today is based on the region of Spain in Barcelona, and there are different laws, aren't there, that apply in other regions in Barcelona?
In fact, I was talking for most expats that are living in the south of Spain or in Canary Island. I mean, in common with common civil law. In Barcelona, in Galicia, in the Balearic Island, we have a civil special law that most of them, what they talk is about all the financial rules to make the division of the property. Because, for example, in Catalonia, we have separation of assets. We don't have this sociedad de gananciales, and each spouse only has what is registered in his or her name.
Okay, thank you. So different rules apply to different regions, and that's important to note. Yes. Well, thank you, Mónica. That was a really thorough whiz through the family laws in Spain relating to divorce and finances. It's lovely to speak to you. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Take care. Be safe.